How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. So the Cincinnati Bengals locking down Joe Burrow, long-term deal. Immediately the next day, all eyes are turned on wide receiver T Higgins. A lot of people saying, hey, is T Higgins about to get that money? Burrow's deal's done. Got some money to spend. I tell you what, you don't want to sit down for this one. Go ahead and take a seat. Be patient. Be patient because it's probably going to be very controversial, very, very polarizing in that regard, to where we go down this road and say, hey, I don't think the T Higgins contract happens. I think there's a good reason it doesn't happen. Now, the Bengals could do it. I think there's a lot of fact-based, there's a lot of statistics that say it doesn't need to happen or probably shouldn't happen. T Higgins is going to enter his contract year here. 3 years in, about 1,000-yard receiver on average. That's what he's been. That's who's been consistent. We love T around here. There's no doubt, no degrading him. He's a great player, great talent. Love having him around. This team brings a lot of potential. But at the end of the day, 1,000-yard receiver, you figure that into the pay. How much are we going to pay this guy? A lot of people are saying the Bengals are going to wrap 55 million into two receivers. That's literally, with that Burrow contract and those two, that's half their salary. Half their cap spent on three positions, that's a lot. So you have to start really dissecting things. If it was just T Higgins, there's no chase, maybe it was Higgins, Boyd, and an up-and-comer, it's like, yeah, you got to get that deal done. No questions asked. But $25 million a year, T Higgins, $20 million a year in T Higgins, you got to start to question, is that where the money is best spent? I mean, this is a Cincinnati Bengals team. There's a couple things you got to look at here. First of all, I mean, you want to talk about the Bengals situation or historically in the league here? The Patriots, they won 3 Super Bowls with Julian Edelman as their number one. They watch guys walk out the door after walk out the door. Edelman runs that chip. It's like, Edelman is, I mean, he's a great player. I don't think he was ever on Chase's level. He was a great slot guy. They made it work. They did have Gronk in and out sometimes, but you know how he was dealing with injuries. A lot of times he wasn't playing most of the season. Nonetheless, though, the Patriots being the modern dynasty that there was, they had, hey, here's an offensive line. We'll give you a solid tight end. We'll give you one number one, and we're gonna take the best quarterback in the league. He's gonna have time to find these guys, and we're gonna win with great defense. And it won over and over again. The Patriots' fourth Super Bowl, you go way back. It was Deion Branch led them with just under 900 receiving yards on the season. You go to their fifth Super Bowl, David Givens. I can't even think of his name. The guy didn't play that long. Givens led this team in receiving, right over or just under 900 receiving yards. There was never this dominant duo. I mean, there was Wes Walker, there was Randy Moss. They even had Edelman at one point in time. Didn't win a Super Bowl though. You look at the Patrick Mahomes just last season. He did it with Travis Kelce and friends. There's no question about it. It was Travis Kelce and friends. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. You look at it. I think every single the Bengals three top receivers are better than everybody on that field besides Kelce last season. You look at the year before, the Rams, Van Jefferson and Cooper Kupp. It was again Cooper Kupp and company. I can't think if it was on an Eagles team. The year before, it was obviously that year the Chiefs had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. That was, again, an exception to the rule because Tyreek Hill is still on a lower deal. I think you also look and say, hey, well, if you do look back and say there was a couple teams that did win Super Bowls, you look, it was Peyton Manning won with DT and Emmanuel Sanders. Brady won with Godwin and Evans, but as those guys were leaving an old situation as a free agent quarterback, entering a new situation. And, I can't remember Manning, but Brady, he took a team-friendly deal, took a cut to play there. So that matters. That's the way they was making room for these guys that was getting big money contracts while they was playing. Otherwise, if you look historically at elite quarterbacks, they get their number one man, oftentimes a tight end or an average tight end. They get their number one man, a tight end, and they work from there. Because if you go out there and pay for all these weapons, you put half your salary into 3 players. The offensive line's either going to be weak or the defense is going to be weak. And then you end up in yourself, the defense is weak, you end up in a Drew Brees situation where you're throwing for 5,000 yards every season and can't contend for a Super Bowl. If the offensive line's weak, you're going to destroy your quarterback and your run game, and you don't go that direction. So I think you have to be careful how you spend this money. And I think that's difficult to digest as a Bengals homer and as a Bengals fan when you see all these guys. You always want to keep your players. But as far as I'm concerned, again, if you give Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes time to throw the football like he had last night in that Thursday night football game, yeah, a couple guys dropped some passes. Mahomes just made some bad throws. Mahomes had a bad game. That's what happens when Mahomes gets pressured. Right? You've seen it coming this season. There's some offensive line rework. Kelce and that, you knew it was coming. Mahomes doesn't play the best under pressure. He plays while scrambling and just waiting for his guys to get open. He was missing throws. It happens. He had a bad game. It happens. I mean, I think if you give him that chance over and over again, he could have won that game if they didn't drop a couple of those passes. You don't expect that to happen in general. But all that being said, you put Joe Burrow in the Patrick Mahomes conversation. You put him in, I don't want to say the Tom Brady because he hasn't been here long enough, but you put him in that kind of status where you expect him to perform at a high level if you protect him at all costs. And you give him 3 seconds to throw the football. You give him Jamar Chase and company. You give him Jamar Chase and you think that, so these young guys you drafted can be average. That's all he needs. You need a defense to lock it down, and Joe Burrow's going to score the points. And that's what's really, really important here for the Bengals. And the second thing is, again, you talk about the guys the Bengals drafted. Historically, let's look at the Bengals over the last 10, 15 years. They've done a very good and an exceptional job. Now, that was John Ross, but besides that, they've done a really good job drafting wide receivers. They plucked out Marvin Jones, Tyler Boyd, Sanu. You got Higgins. They've done great. And you say, again, this season where a couple of these guys they drafted, do these guys come up and sprout up next and be good players? Meanwhile, you look at the offensive line position, first round pick they put in, and it's been bust after bust after bust after bust. They have struggled, and they have struggled mightily of years past to draft and scout the offensive line position. That being said, you got to look and consider that, well, if we excel at one of these positions, you got to try to get on the low. You can't pay every single position free agent money. You can't pay them all non-entry level deal monies. You have to get some players on your team that are good players that are on that entry level contract, that draft contract, if you will. And if you're not going to get at the offensive line position, they haven't, plucked anybody. We'll see how Murphy does. But, again, same with the defensive line position. But they've been paying the defensive line, DJ Reader, Trey Hendrickson. They've been bringing these guys in. You have to be able to draft somewhere, and you have to play to those strengths. And if your strength right now is drafting wide receivers, and that's got to be the position that you pay, $2 to $5 million for 4 years, that's so be it. That's fine. But you have to play to your strengths here, and you say, okay, well, maybe Higgins gets 20, maybe he gets 25. Okay, whatever. Let's say he gets 25. Right now, it can work for a year or two because some of the guys are under contract, but you get the year 3, year 4, year 5. That's when you get into the issues and say, what if instead of you played that game, you brought in again? We'll see what Irv Smith does. Let's say Irv Smith gives this guy, let's say he gives him 700 receiving yards. 700, 800 yards. That's a lot. But let's say you get that and you can throw some money at Irv Smith and you could throw maybe $15 million at an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman to improve in the trenches. Games are won and lost in the trenches. You got to have the money to do it. I know a lot of people are talking like, let's watch Reader walk out the door. He's getting old anyway. We'll take Higgins instead. It's like, I understand that. I respect it. You're right. Reader's getting old. You got to be careful with that. Right now, though, he's a game changer in that defensive line. So even if you let Reader go, it's like, well, who's the next man up? Can we bring somebody else in via free agency and spend that money once again to fill that position? Because you're much more likely to do that than what they've been drafting of late compared to the wide receiver position where you can feel a little bit more comfortable. So overall, again, I'd love for him to keep T Higgins more than anybody. But you gotta play the financially responsible game here and say you just can't load up an offense and expect to stop some of these other teams. And especially what happens, what we're not considering is what happens if Lou Anarumo leaves. Lou Anarumo is doing way too much with what he has. I mean, he's we call him Ludini for a reason. He's been impressive. What if you bring in an average defensive coordinator with this group without a pass rush? What happens? Ifs and buts. But right now, what's working is working. Burrow went out there and raked last season when those guys went down. No, don't forget that. I'd like T to stay. I don't think they should keep him, though. I'm be completely honest. A little crazy. Love to hear your thoughts, though. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.